Hey there. I know why you're here. You're looking for a story that will help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Something calming, a little mysterious. Something that carries your mind away. Well, you've come to the right place. Before we begin tonight's journey, do me a little favor. Tap the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Even just a good night. It really helps more sleepy souls like you find their way here. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's story. It started with a sound, soft, distant, almost forgettable. Just a knock, then another, perfectly timed. I thought it was someone at the door, a neighbor, a pipe, but the pattern was too precise, too familiar. The knocks returned each night, always when I was alone, always when I lay in bed. And that's when I noticed it. Each knock matched the rhythm of my heartbeat, one by one, in sync with the thump in my chest. Not faster, not slower, just identical, like it was listening, or worse, mirroring me. I tried to ignore it, reason with it, even escape it. But the more I feared it, the faster my heart raced, and the faster the knocking followed. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was chasing, tapping in time with my panic, my breath, my soul. And now, I can't tell if the sound is outside my body or inside my bones. What happens when your heartbeat isn't yours anymore? Stay with me, and you'll understand why the final knock may come from within. I've never been someone who believes in signs. I've always chalked things up to coincidence, noise, or stress. You know, like when your phone rings at the exact moment you were about to text someone, or when a song plays that lines up a little too well with your thoughts. That's how it started for me. A knock. One sharp, dull thud on the wall behind my headboard. I didn't even turn at first. I figured it was just the neighbors, maybe moving furniture or something. But then it came again. Not louder, not more aggressive, just certain. I paused, turned my head slightly, and waited. Nothing. Silence so thick it seemed to press against my ears. I remember shrugging, rolling over, and burying myself under the covers like a child pretending monsters weren't real. I had no idea that night was the last time I'd feel safe in my own home. The next day was ordinary. Work dragged like usual. Emails, coffee, people talking just loud enough to be annoying, but never interesting. I didn't think about the knock at all. Not even once. That's what unnerves me now, looking back. How quickly I forgot it. Like it wanted to be forgotten. Like it knew it would come back stronger. I came home that night, threw my bag on the couch, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the TV. Same routine, same background noise. But around midnight, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, I heard it again. This time 3 knocks, evenly spaced, deliberate. And they came from the exact same spot on the wall. Not the front door, not the ceiling, the wall behind my bed. I froze, not in fear at first, just in confusion. 3 perfect knocks, as if answering a question I didn't ask. I turned slowly this time. I was fully awake, fully aware. I stared at the wall like it might blink back at me. It didn't, but I noticed something I hadn't the night before. The knocks, they had a rhythm to them. Not random, not impatient, like someone waiting to be let in. They were steady, calm, like a metronome, like a heartbeat. I put a hand to my chest and waited. For a moment, nothing. Then another knock came. Just one. And in that awful moment, I felt my own heart thump in sync with it. Not just close, exactly in sync. I sat up, trying to explain it away. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Maybe I imagined the sound entirely, but the sensation lingered, like the trace of a dream you can't shake, the kind that feels too real to ignore. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I didn't even close my eyes. I lay there, counting knocks, counting heartbeats, counting the space between the two, and finding no space at all. By the third night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the wall, heart pounding before I even heard anything. I waited, watched, and then, as if on cue, knock. One beat, then another. I put my fingers to my neck this time, measuring my pulse, and again, it matched. The knock came every time my heart did. I tested it. I slowed my breath, tried to calm down. The knocks slowed too. I sat up and took a few quick breaths, making my heart race. And the knocks sped up. That's when the fear settled in, cold and heavy. It wasn't the kind of fear you can talk yourself out of. It was the kind that roots in your stomach and whispers that something is watching you from the dark. It didn't matter that there was no one in the room with me. Something was reacting. Something was listening. And it was beginning to sound less like a response and more like an echo. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I told them I was sick, and honestly, I looked it. My eyes were bloodshot, skin pale, hands shaky. I kept checking my pulse all day, and even during daylight, when everything should have felt safer, I still heard the faintest knocking behind me, like it didn't care about time, like it had followed me from the night before. I tried calling my building manager, asking if there were pipes in the walls, if maybe something needed fixing. He brushed it off. Old place. Things knock around. But this wasn't things. This was something, and it knew me. It wasn't mechanical or plumbing related. The knocks weren't hollow or random. They had intention and timing, a kind of knowing, like someone or something was listening for the rhythm of my body and choosing to echo it. No one else heard it, just me. And that made it worse. That night, I didn't go to bed. I stayed on the couch, lights on, TV playing low. But even then, in that artificial safety, I heard it, soft, methodical. The knock came again, this time not behind my bed, but behind the wall to my left, almost like it had moved to follow me. I put my hand to my chest, and there it was again, my heart, my pulse. The knock, identical. I stood up, walked around, tried to break the pattern, but no matter where I moved in the room, it followed, like it wasn't in the walls anymore, like it was something attached to me, mimicking me, or maybe waiting for me to notice what it really was. I took a deep breath and held it. For 5 full seconds, I didn't exhale. I didn't blink. I waited, and the knocks stopped. But when I exhaled, and my heart kicked again, so did the knock. I dropped the glass in my hand. It shattered against the floor. But I didn't flinch. I was too busy listening. I didn't sleep again, not even a nap. The next day blurred into the one before. I couldn't tell if I was awake or dreaming. The knocks started happening more frequently, even when I tried to ignore them. In the shower, in the kitchen. At one point, I even heard them during a phone call. The sound would thud through the walls, always measured, always familiar. It never screamed or scraped or slammed. It never had to. The horror wasn't in its volume, but in its certainty, in its calm. It was patient, like it knew something I didn't. I started wondering if it was trying to warn me or claim me. I stopped calling friends. I stopped replying to messages. The world outside the knock faded away. There was only my body, and the terrifying realization that whatever it wasn't outside anymore. It had found the one place I couldn't escape, inside my own heartbeat. I kept telling myself it had to be in my head. Stress, sleep deprivation, maybe some kind of anxiety episode that my body was turning into this phenomenon. I even tried to journal it all down, thinking that if I could organize it on paper, I could somehow shrink the fear. But every time I picked up the pen, I heard it again. That dull knock, like a fist against drywall, synced perfectly to the tremor I felt under my ribs. I would pause mid-sentence, listen to the rhythm, and stare at the page as my pulse beat through my fingertips. I couldn't even write anymore without hearing it. Answer me. Each word I scribbled down was met with that sound, and I swear, sometimes it wasn't even behind the wall. It was right beneath my skin. I started timing it, literally. I opened a stopwatch app on my phone and counted my pulse while recording the sound with a microphone I bought online. I thought maybe I could finally prove something was real, but the recordings played back blank. Just the faint ambient hum of the room and nothing else. No knock, no rhythm, nothing. But while I was recording, I heard it clear as day. And the strangest part was, I could feel it too. Not just hear it, but physically sense it, like a vibration in my bones. That sensation grew each day, a kind of pressure in my chest, like being underwater. My breath got shorter, my hands colder, and the knock more insistent. I didn't even have to touch my neck anymore to know what it was doing. It was always there, waiting to echo. I stopped turning the lights off. I kept every bulb in the apartment glowing all night. But even in the artificial brightness, the dark crept in. The kind of darkness that doesn't need shadows to exist. The kind that lives in your body. The kind that watches you when no one else does. I started avoiding the bedroom altogether. I didn't want to lie in the same position, in the same bed, where it all started. But it didn't matter. The knock found me wherever I went. I tried sleeping in the bathtub one night, thinking maybe the tile and water pipes would interfere, give me some distance. But the moment I shut my eyes and exhaled, knock, loud and slow, just beneath the porcelain. I sat up so fast, I nearly slipped and cracked my skull open. And then, as I sat panting and dripping in silence, another knock came, just one. And I felt my heart respond like a slave, answering its master. I went to urgent care the next day. I told them my heart was behaving strangely. I was terrified of a murmur, or worse, a failing valve. They ran the tests, ECG, blood pressure, vitals, all perfect. I even asked if a pacemaker could somehow be malfunctioning, even though I didn't have one. The doctor looked at me with that clinical sympathy, you see when they think you're either lying or unraveling. I asked if he could hear it. The knock. He just shook his head. What knock? That night, I sat in my car outside the clinic for over an hour, too afraid to go home. I watched people walk past on the sidewalk, laughing and alive. I wondered if they could hear their hearts without fear. I wondered if whatever was inside me could ever get inside them too. I started thinking about death more than I should have. Not in a dramatic, attention-seeking kind of way, but in a logical one. What would happen if my heart simply stopped? Would the knocking stop too? Or would it continue without me, on its own, like some cursed drumbeat I'd left behind? I even Googled things like auditory hallucinations, heart rhythm, and phantom heartbeat sounds. I fell into forums, medical journals, and paranormal threads until my eyes blurred. Some people described something similar, knocking in walls, rhythmic tapping, but no one had what I had. No one said it moved with their heart. No one said it followed them. I remember reading a single comment in one of the threads, buried between spam and nonsense. It said, "When it syncs with you, it means it's found a home." The comment had no replies, no likes, just silence beneath it. By the end of the week, I couldn't tell if I was asleep or awake anymore. I would find myself staring into corners, listening to nothing, but expecting something. My body twitched involuntarily. My fingers trembled, even when I wasn't scared. My heart beat, even when I didn't feel alive. And always, the knock followed. I tried earplugs, noise machines, music loud enough to shake the walls, but no matter what I used to cover the sound, it found its way through. I couldn't drown it out, because it wasn't just sound. It was rhythm, it was connection. It was in the blueprint of me now, carved into the cadence of my pulse. I remember walking into the hallway mirror one evening and staring at my own reflection for almost 20 minutes. I wasn't looking to see if anything was behind me. I was trying to see if I still looked like myself, or if I looked like someone being echoed. That night, I tried something different. I turned off every light. I sat in the middle of my apartment, legs crossed, palms on my knees, like I was meditating. I slowed my breathing, slowed my thoughts, tried to face it. No distractions, no hiding, and after a few minutes, it began again. Knock, knock, knock. My heart kept time like a drum line in some invisible army. And then, something new happened. A single knock came early, not in sync, not matching, ahead, like it was no longer following, but leading. That's when the panic set in. Not the kind that makes you scream or run, the deeper kind, the kind that makes you sit perfectly still because you know something is changing and it's already too late to stop it. My heart beat again. The knock came after, but now I wasn't sure who was echoing who anymore. I wasn't sure if my heart was beating on its own or if it had simply begun listening. I thought the worst part was the knocking itself, the sound of it, the rhythm, the persistence. But I was wrong. The worst part was what came after I accepted it. Once I stopped fighting it, once I let the knocks in and sat there counting them, syncing them with my breaths, something shifted. It was no longer about the sound. It was about the space between them. I began to hear something else, something faint, underneath the knocks. It wasn't words, not exactly, more like the shadow of a whisper, like a breath pressed into the silence. At first I thought it was my own breathing, but it wasn't. It came just after the knocks, like an exhale not from my lungs, but from something trying to mimic breath. That was when I realized it wasn't just copying my heart. It was trying to become me. I started avoiding stillness. Any moment I stood or sat in silence, it crept in. I would walk in circles through my apartment, just to keep my blood moving. I drank coffee until I felt sick. I paced through the night like a prisoner in a padded cell. I tried turning on the faucet or blasting the fan just for noise, but it wasn't enough. The knock always cut through. Always that same slow, deliberate rhythm. Never too loud, never too soft. Just precise. As if it were measuring me, learning me, watching for the moment I dropped my guard again. And when I finally sat to rest, when my legs gave out from exhaustion and my head fell into my hands, the knock resumed with a calm certainty, like it knew it had won. One evening, I looked out the window to distract myself and noticed something unusual. A man across the street, staring up at my building. I couldn't see his face clearly, just his silhouette beneath a flickering streetlight. But he stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly. He didn't move, didn't pace, didn't check his phone. He just stood there, staring up, right at my floor. I closed the curtain instinctively, heart racing, knock. I froze. It came again, faster this time. My chest tightened, my pulse kicking, like it was trying to punch its way out of my body. I ripped the curtain back open, and the man was gone, vanished, like he was never there at all. But the knock didn't stop. It kept going, pacing me, pushing me, matching every terrified thump of my heart. And I realized it wasn't only following me anymore, it was calling others. I started dreaming in rhythms, not images, not stories, just beats. I would close my eyes and fall into blackness, and in that blackness there was only the sound of a knock, over and over, like a countdown. I couldn't stop. Sometimes I would wake up, gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and hear it continuing, even though I was fully awake. Once I dreamed I was buried alive, and the only thing I could hear from above the soil was knocking, perfectly spaced, like someone standing above my grave, tapping gently on the coffin lid, not to rescue me, but to let me know I wasn't alone, that I'd never be alone again. When I woke up from that one, I screamed for a long time, not from fear, but because I wasn't sure if I'd actually woken up. I still don't know for certain. I tried to fight back. I started blasting music through noise-canceling headphones, drums, synths, bass, anything with a beat that could drown it out. But even with the volume maxed out, the knock found its way through, not as a sound, but as a feeling. I could feel it under the floorboards, inside the furniture, in the spaces between the songs, like it was tapping its own beat beneath every rhythm I tried to use against it. It didn't care about volume or logic. It only cared about control. That night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and noticed something I hadn't before. My veins were twitching, just slightly, beneath the surface of my skin, like something was trying to keep tempo from the inside out. I touched my neck. My pulse was still there, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt borrowed, or leased, like something was just using me as an instrument. One night, I don't remember which anymore, I locked myself in the closet, completely dark. No phone, no lights, just pitch black, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, whatever it was, couldn't find me there. I sat curled up, knees to my chest, trying to silence my own thoughts. I could feel every beat of my heart echoing through my ribs like war drums. And then it stopped, just for a moment. My pulse went silent. It wasn't fear, it wasn't a medical issue. It was just gone, like my body had been paused. The silence was worse than the knocking. It was full and thick, like being suspended between seconds. And then knock. One, singular, hollow. It wasn't a response to my heart anymore. It was a replacement, a command, and my chest answered. One thump, like it was obeying. From that point on, I stopped pretending it might go away. I knew it wouldn't. The knock had changed something fundamental. It wasn't just a haunting, it was a hijacking. My body still moved like mine. My voice still sounded like mine. But I knew I wasn't the conductor anymore. Something else was keeping the rhythm. Something else had the metronome. I started noticing tiny moments. My hand moving before I told it to. My foot tapping when I wasn't thinking. My breath sinking with a knock I hadn't yet heard. I wasn't imagining it. I was being prepared. For what? I didn't know, but one thing was certain. Whatever was knocking was already inside. I stopped measuring time in hours or days. I started measuring it in knocks. Each moment passed, not by the sun rising or setting, but by how fast the rhythm thudded through the walls, my chest, the floor under my feet. I didn't know when the knocking truly began. Not exactly, but I knew it was getting faster. Not by much, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I could feel it. Like a train slowly gaining speed in the distance. So subtle, you don't notice it until it's already upon you. My heartbeat no longer set the pace. The knocking did, and I was being dragged along. My heart followed like a loyal dog on a leash. A leash I hadn't realized was around my throat until I tried to resist. I started recording myself at night. Video, not just audio. I thought if I could see it from the outside, I might understand what was happening. The first night I reviewed the footage, I nearly threw my phone across the room. Around 3:08 a.m., I was dead asleep. My chest rose and fell calmly. But then, without moving, my right hand lifted and tapped 3 times on the headboard. I didn't wake up. My breathing didn't change. But my hand moved with eerie precision. Tap, tap, tap. Just like the knock. And then, a few seconds later, my heart monitor on the screen jumped slightly, as if the knocking had triggered my heart, not the other way around. It was backwards. It was wrong. And it confirmed the thing I feared most. I wasn't being haunted. I was being operated. I ran to my doctor again. I showed him the footage, desperate, wild-eyed, practically begging him to explain it. He looked at me with the kind of practiced calm that told me he was more worried about my mind than my body. He talked about sleepwalking, parasomnias, anxiety-induced hallucinations. I told him I wasn't asleep when I felt it, that the knock followed me when I was awake too. He offered a prescription, some pills to help me rest. I didn't take them. I knew if I let go long enough to sleep, the thing inside me would keep going. It didn't need rest. It had rhythm, and I had already given it too many beats to feed on. I left the clinic with the bottle still sealed in my pocket. My hands were trembling the whole way home, and not from withdrawal, from anticipation. I started noticing other people, strangers, tapping their fingers without meaning to, on subway rails, on tablet tops, in checkout lines. Little motions, steady and slow, almost all the same tempo. I stared at a woman on the bus whose fingers tapped against her purse in a pattern nearly identical to mine. When she looked up, our eyes locked. She froze. Her tapping stopped. And then, without a word, she stood and got off 3 stops early. She didn't look back. I think she knew. I think maybe she'd heard it too. And worse, I think she knew what came next. That the knock wasn't just for me anymore. It was spreading, searching. It was finding others whose hearts could learn the same song. The final moment came on a Monday. At least, I think it was. I hadn't left the apartment in days. I was standing in front of the mirror again, shirt off, watching the way my veins pulsed. That subtle twitch beneath the skin. The knock had gotten faster, now thudding at a tempo too quick to be natural. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from pressure, like I was filling with something I couldn't contain. And then the knock stopped, just like that. No warning, no fade. It stopped, mid-beat, mid-thud, mid-rhythm. And for the first time in weeks, my heart had no sound to match. It floated there, uncertain, I stood frozen, tears in my eyes, waiting for what came next. I thought it was over. I thought I'd won. That silence lasted for 7 seconds. Then boom, one massive knock, louder than anything before, cracked through the wall. My chest convulsed, like I'd been defibrillated. I stumbled backward, gasping, and then the knocks resumed. But now they didn't match my heartbeat. My heartbeat matched them. The tempo wasn't mine anymore. It raced ahead like a manic drum roll, and my body had no choice but to chase it. My pulse slammed in my throat, my wrists, my ears. I collapsed to the floor, hands over my chest, trying to slow it down, but it wouldn't stop. It kept getting faster, 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 like a countdown, like a signal. My vision blurred. I thought I was dying. Maybe I was, and just before I blacked out, I heard something new. A second knock, not echoing, not copying, a second source. I woke up sometime later on the cold floor, the room swimming with late afternoon light. My heart had returned to a normal rhythm. The knock had faded to a low, distant tapping, like it was waiting again, letting me recover, giving me breath only so it could take it again later. And that was when I finally understood the truth. The knock wasn't hunting me, it was training me, teaching my body a new tempo, forcing me to beat to a rhythm that wasn't mine. And now that I'd learnt it, I could hear it everywhere. In the clicking of radiators, in the blinking of streetlights, in the pause between spoken words. The world wasn't silent anymore. It was pulsing, living, knocking, and I wasn't alone. I don't think I ever was. The days that followed weren't normal, but they passed as if they were. I returned to work, showed up in meetings, smiled when someone cracked a joke, and even went out for lunch like a person who wasn't terrified every time his heart ticked once too loudly. But beneath it all, I knew something had changed. My body still moved to its rhythm, but I wasn't sure whose rhythm it was anymore. I no longer felt like I was syncing with the knocking. It felt like I was part of it now, like it had chosen me, taught me, molded me into a perfect metronome. And the worst part was, no one noticed. No one saw that anything was off. No one heard it but me. My co-workers joked about coffee jitters, told me I looked like I needed a weekend away. I nodded, laughed hollowly. All the while the knock beat softly in my chest like a drum warming up. I kept my phone on me at all times now, not to contact anyone but to track my pulse. I downloaded every heart monitor app I could find, convinced that if something abnormal showed up, at least I'd have proof. But the readings were always stable, always perfect. Resting heart rate normal, heart rhythm steady, BPM ideal, no red flags, no warnings. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't, because even when the screen told me I was calm, I could feel the knock growing louder, not in volume but in intention. It wasn't reacting anymore. It wasn't waiting for me to feel something. It was making me feel something. Sometimes when I sat still too long, my heart would speed up for no reason, and the knock would follow. Other times the knock would come first, and my pulse would obediently race to catch up. I wasn't in control, not anymore. I was a listener. The hallucinations or whatever they were started small. Shadows where there weren't windows. Blurs in the corner of my eyes. Streetlights flickering in sync with my heartbeat. I could tell the knock had reached outside of me now. It was bleeding into the world around me. Or maybe I was just seeing things through its rhythm, like someone wearing tinted glasses for too long, not realizing everything had changed color. One night, I walked past a row of mailboxes and heard the knock again, not in my chest, but echoing inside the metal boxes. Each one thudded softly as I passed, a heartbeat traveling through them like a signal, a syncopated line. I stopped and listened. The knocking skipped one box entirely. I opened it. It was empty. No mail, no paper, just dust. But etched into the back wall, barely visible, unless the light hit it right, were 5 letters. Still, I stared at it until my own heartbeat vanished into silence again. That silence had become more terrifying than the knock itself. It didn't mean peace, it meant expectation. Like the moment before a conductor's baton comes down, when the orchestra holds its breath. That's what the silence felt like now, a tension, a preparation. My entire body would freeze when it happened, as if the knocking had paused to listen to something I couldn't hear, or someone. There were nights I'd lie in bed, sweating, shaking, ears straining in the dark, and there would be nothing. No knock, no heartbeat, just an eerie stillness where I didn't even feel alive. And then boom, the knock would return like a thunderclap through my ribs, and the rest of me would scramble to keep up. I couldn't tell anymore if it was mercy or a warning. I tried to leave the city once, packed a bag, told no one, and just started driving. I didn't care where I went, just away. Somewhere rural, somewhere quiet. I turned the radio up to mask the knocking in my head, but even the songs started lining up with it. The beat of each track pulsed exactly where my heart did. By the 3rd hour of the drive, I turned the radio off, and the silence felt worse. That's when I noticed the tapping on the steering wheel. My own fingers. I hadn't realized I was doing it. The same rhythm, the knock's rhythm. When I tried to stop, my hands clenched the wheel involuntarily, white-knuckled and rigid. I pulled over, breathing fast. My heart raced. Knock, 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 on the windshield. I looked up and saw no one. I drove back that same night. There was no point pretending anymore. It wasn't about the place. It wasn't about my apartment, or the walls, or the shadows. The knock didn't live in a location. It lived in me, in my veins, my bones, my breath, my reflection. Sometimes I'd see myself blink in the mirror, half a second after I knew I had. Just a delay, just enough to unsettle. Other times I'd pass my own shadow and feel like it was watching me instead of following. Once I turned off the bathroom light and swore I saw someone step backward into the dark with me. But when I flipped it back on, just me, again, just my eyes, my heartbeat, my knock. I told myself I was going crazy. I told myself it wasn't real, but deep down, I knew something else. It didn't matter if I believed it or not. It believed in me. And lately, it felt like it was preparing something, training me, yes, but also conditioning me. The knock had a pace to it now, a rhythm that felt like a language, like instructions. I would lie awake at night, heart beating too quickly, and realize I was tapping responses into my bedsheet. I wasn't thinking about it. It just happened. My fingers would twitch and knock on their own. 1 knock, 2, pause, 3, long pause. I didn't know what I was saying, but I felt it answering. A pressure in my ears, a tightness in my jaw, a burning in my chest, as if it was teaching me something through repetition. Some nights, I felt as though I was repeating its name in a rhythm older than language. And on those nights, I swear the knock got closer. Not through the walls, not under the floor, inside my breath, inside the hollow between each beat. There was a night when I tested it. Openly, intentionally. I sat in complete silence in the middle of my apartment. Lights off, no distractions. I focused only on my heart. I tried to slow it down with deep breathing, the way meditation apps had taught me. The knocking responded like always, matching me thud for thud. Then I tried something different. I lied. I held my breath and forced my body to stay still, but in my mind, I imagined my heart speeding up. I imagined panic. I pretended to be afraid. And unbelievably, the knocking sped up. It didn't follow my real pulse anymore. It responded to intention. It knew what I was thinking. Or maybe it didn't just mimic me. Maybe it read me, that thought, more than anything, unraveled whatever grip on reality I had left. If it wasn't a haunting or a hallucination, then what the hell was it? A presence? A parasite? A second heartbeat? I began hearing it in other people, not the knock itself, but the rhythm, the way someone's speech pattern matched a familiar tempo, or the way a man at a cafe stirred his coffee in perfect time to the beat. I heard in my bones. I started wondering how many of us had it. How many were hearing the knock and simply hiding it, or worse, accepting it. There were moments when I'd make eye contact with a stranger and see something flicker behind their gaze, like they recognized me, as if we were part of the same silent choir, each of us bound by the same unspoken rhythm. It no longer felt like I was cursed. It felt like I'd been recruited. I kept searching for answers, scouring the darkest parts of the internet, digging through arcane forums and encrypted threads. Most were nonsense, half-baked ghost stories and sleep paralysis journals. But in one forgotten post on a forum that hadn't been active in years, I found a paragraph that stopped me cold. It read, "When the knock becomes the beat and the beat becomes the breath, you are no longer alone. You are no longer one." It wasn't signed. No comments followed. But I read it over and over. The phrasing felt familiar, almost like something I'd dreamed before reading it. My head ached. My chest tightened. The knock pulsed once, hard, and in that moment, I realized what scared me most. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I was afraid of how right it felt, as if I were always supposed to be this way. One night, the knock stopped altogether. I was brushing my teeth, staring at the mirror, and it simply went silent. My chest still beat, but the echo was gone. No more sync, no more rhythm, just absence. The silence was paralyzing. I stood motionless for what felt like hours, waiting. Nothing came. I even tapped on the sink once, then twice, but no reply followed. And that scared me more than all the nights of knocking combined, because I'd grown used to it. I'd grown dependent on the pattern. It had become a part of me, a tether to something I didn't understand, but had accepted. And now that it was gone, I felt lost, hollow, like a puppet without strings. The following day was the first I felt completely alone in months. Not the kind of alone that means isolation, but a deeper kind. The kind where even your own thoughts sound distant, where the world moves just a few seconds faster than you do. Every conversation I had, every noise I heard, it all seemed slightly off, like a movie where the audio is out of sync. People looked blurry, lights flickered wrong. My own breath felt artificial, like I had to remember how to do it. I walked through the day like a ghost, waiting for the knock to return. I even begged for it, whispered into the dark corners of rooms. "Come back, please." I didn't mean to resist. That's when I understood. The knocking hadn't vanished. It was watching to see what I'd do without it. That night, I sat in bed and listened, not for the knock, but for the space it had once filled. I counted seconds, I tracked my breath, and slowly, subtly, it came back. Not as a sound this time, but as a pull, a feeling in my chest, like someone tugging at a string. My heart sped up, unprompted, and the knock returned to match it. But this time, it didn't sound like it was coming from the wall. It sounded like it was coming from under the floorboards. From beneath me, each knock was deeper, slower, like it had to travel through something thick to reach me. I pressed my ear to the floor. The wood was cold, but the knock was there, steady, measured, like it had never really left. It had just gone deeper. After that night, the dreams changed. I no longer dreamed of being buried or chased or trapped in rhythm. I dreamed of depth, long hallways, infinite staircases, empty elevators that never reached their floor, and always a sound beneath me, calling me downward. The knock wasn't chasing me anymore. It was leading me, asking me to follow. And I was beginning to wonder what would happen if I did. What waited at the bottom of the rhythm? What lived in the silence between knocks? My fear was no longer of being haunted. It was of being invited, and the terrifying truth. I was already listening. The first time I truly understood the pull of the knock was when I heard it outside, not inside the walls, not through the floorboards, but in the world. I was walking home one evening, headphones on, pretending to be normal, pretending to enjoy the wind and the way the streetlights shimmered on puddles after rain. Then, from across the street, I heard it, knock, 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 echoing faintly from a metal grate on the sidewalk. It was soft, distant, but unmistakable. The rhythm was exact. My heart jumped in response, aligning instantly, like it remembered something my brain did not. I stopped walking, pulled out my earbuds, and just stood there. The knocking continued for another few seconds, then stopped. And when I turned to look around, no one else seemed to have noticed it. No heads turned, no cars paused, but I knew what I'd heard. I knew it had called out to me. That moment did something to me. It unhooked the last threads of certainty I had. From that day forward, the knock no longer needed to hide. It no longer cared whether I was alone or in a crowd. It would find me wherever I was, sometimes faint, sometimes loud, but always timed. It didn't matter if I was in a grocery store, a parking lot, even the office. I'd hear it in the subtle shifts of noise, an elevator ding, a printer's churn, even the footsteps of someone behind me, all falling into rhythm, all syncing with me. One night, I heard it in a restaurant, the clatter of silverware, the clang of a dropped dish, 3 perfectly spaced beats. My hands began to tremble, not from fear, from recognition. I no longer had to guess if it was a coincidence. I knew it wasn't. And worse, I started to feel like I wasn't the only one being synced anymore. I saw others react the way I once did. Stiff shoulders, a sudden pause mid-conversation, a twitch of the eyes, as if a sound had brushed past them too closely. I watched a child cover his ears during a thunderstorm, not because of the thunder, but after 3 short knocks hit the underside of a wooden bench. His mother didn't notice, but I saw his face. He looked like he had heard something familiar. That's when I started to believe the knocking wasn't random. It was a signal, a kind of call, a method to mark those who could hear it. The echo wasn't mine alone anymore. It was part of something spreading, something rehearsing. I tried to trace it. I looked up strange disappearances, People who'd gone missing from their homes with no signs of struggle, no warnings. The deeper I searched, the more I found odd consistencies. Phrases in police reports like no sign of forced entry, house was left untouched, bed unmade, door still locked. But in two separate articles buried in the miscellaneous notes from friends or neighbors, there was a pattern. Both had described the missing person as recently distracted by tapping noises or complaining about strange knocking sounds. No one else had paid attention to that detail, but I did. They'd heard it, just like I had, and then they followed it, or it called them away. Either way, they were gone now, and the knock had moved on. I tried fighting it again. I locked myself in my apartment for 3 straight days. I turned off all my devices, blocked every source of sound. I even wrapped my hands in cloth so I couldn't accidentally tap, couldn't echo its rhythm, but silence didn't save me. It only made the knock more precise. On the second night, it stopped mimicking me and began to instruct me. I would hear 3 knocks, then feel a pressure in my limbs, a silent command to move, to respond, to repeat. At first, I resisted. I kept still, and then my heart would pound violently, as if punishing me. The pain was so intense I collapsed. When I finally gave in, tapped once, lightly, it stopped. Immediately, like it was pleased, like I'd passed a test. I should have run, should have left everything and vanished. But where would I go? The knock wasn't tied to a house or a place. It was tied to me. It knew my rhythm, my breath, my blood. I was a vessel now, a speaker, and in moments of terrifying clarity, I would find myself not only hearing the knock, but composing it. I'd tap out patterns in my sleep. I'd hum melodies that matched its cadence. Once I even found myself mouthing words I didn't understand, whispers in time with the knock. My voice wasn't even my own, and still, deep down, some part of me liked it. The structure, the certainty, the silence between knocks that promised something bigger was listening, something I might belong to. One morning, I woke with dried blood beneath my fingernails. My knuckles were bruised. I found marks on the wall, indentations, as if I'd been knocking in my sleep. Not with my hand, with my head, over and over. And worse, the pattern wasn't random. It was perfect. Measured, precise. I wasn't resisting anymore. I was rehearsing, and the final realization came, not from the knock, but from my own reflection. I looked in the mirror and watched myself blink, and my reflection blinked first, only by a fraction of a second. But I knew the knock had taught my body well, so well. In fact, it no longer needed to follow me. It was preparing to replace me. I stopped trusting mirrors entirely after that, not because they lied, but because they told the truth too well. Every reflection seemed to move just a second too soon or too late, always in rhythm with a knock I hadn't heard yet, or one I had but tried to ignore. Even my own eyes, once familiar and tired, now stared back at me with something awake behind them, something alert, not malicious, just patient. I taped black cloth over every mirror in the apartment, every surface that could shine back at me. Laptop screens, picture frames, even the glass in the microwave door. I couldn't risk seeing it anymore, couldn't risk witnessing the moment I didn't match myself, because if I saw it, truly saw it, I wasn't sure who'd be watching from the other side. The knocking grew bolder with the mirrors covered, no longer content to haunt the quiet hours of night. It started tapping in the daylight, while I worked, while I ate, once while brushing my teeth, I felt it behind me, not heard but sensed, like a hand poised inches from my back, ready to tap my spine in 3 precise beats. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because I knew if I did, I'd see nothing but feel everything. Instead, I counted silently, matching its rhythm in my head, pretending I was in control, but I wasn't. My breath matched the knock, my jaw clenched in sync. My pulse, now constant background noise, thrummed like a drum roll I hadn't given permission to play. And worst of all, I'd stopped wanting it to stop. I dreamt of places I'd never been, but always the same, underground, vast and humming, filled with others like me. Not faces I recognized, but postures I knew, all standing, all silent, all pulsing with the same internal knock. No one spoke, no one moved, but we all beat in time. I would wake gasping, hand pressed against my chest, not from fear but from longing, like I'd been taken away too early from something I wasn't finished being part of. The dream would linger long after sunrise, like static clinging to my skin. I could hear it in water droplets, in wind chimes, in the faint rumble of passing traffic, a rhythm threading itself through the waking world, stitching it tighter around me. The final shift came when I stopped hearing the knock as separate. It no longer thudded through walls or tapped behind my ears. It was no longer an intruder. It was me, my breath, my blink, my blood. I didn't wait for it anymore. I didn't fear its pace. I matched it without thinking. I walked in step with it, my speech adjusted to it. Pauses in conversation, emphasis on words that matched the pulse. I noticed others picking up on it, co-workers leaning forward at the same moment, strangers finishing my sentences. Once, a man in a bookstore turned to me and whispered, "It's clearer when we stop resisting," and walked away like he hadn't said a word. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. I already knew what he meant. I'd been feeling it for days. I stopped checking the time. My day wasn't scheduled by clocks anymore. It was measured in beats. The knock told me when to rise, when to sleep, when to eat. It pulsed strongest during transitions, thresholds, doorways, elevators, the in-between places. I began seeing them differently, not as empty gaps between destinations, but as passages, like the knock had claimed the space between steps, between thoughts. It lived there, feeding on momentum, pulling me deeper into a rhythm I never consciously joined, but now couldn't escape. My heart no longer pounded from fear. It beat with purpose, with choreography. I wasn't resisting anymore. I was responding. One evening, I returned home and found the door already unlocked. I don't remember leaving it that way. I don't remember much of that day at all. But inside, everything was untouched, except for one thing, a small piece of paper on the floor beneath the window. On it, in shaky graphite lines, was a waveform, a heartbeat, 3 evenly spaced spikes. Then a long pause, then nothing, as if the rhythm simply stopped. Beneath it, one line of text. "When you are ready, knock back." I stared at it for a long time. My chest thudded once, then twice, then 3 times, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, I lifted my hand, slow, deliberate, and tapped once on the wall. Then a 3rd time. I waited. Nothing responded, not at first, but then deep inside my chest, my own heartbeat skipped. Not a pause, a gap, an invitation. I understood, finally, what the knock had been preparing me for. It wasn't haunting me, it was teaching me a language. It wasn't trying to scare me. It was making space inside me, carving a rhythm that belonged not just to life, but to whatever comes after, whatever exists in the hollow between beats. And now as I sit here, hand still against the wall, waiting for the next knock, I realize something that chills me deeper than fear ever could. It's not that the knock is getting louder, it's that I am getting quieter. They started appearing after I knocked back. At first there was no grand unveiling, no crescendo of noise, no obvious supernatural sign to confirm that something irreversible had happened. Just a stillness, a hushed atmosphere that felt watched. My apartment seemed quieter than usual, but not peacefully so. It was the type of quiet that presses against your skin, like a vacuum left behind after something large has exited the room. I walked through it, disoriented, trying to listen to my own heartbeat without hearing the knock. But it wasn't gone. It had simply moved further in. My fingers felt it first, then my ears. Not a sound, but a feeling, like a static signal waiting to reconnect. That was when the sightings began. I didn't recognize them right away. Not as people, not even as watchers. Just presences. It started on the train. A woman sat across from me. Ordinary late 30s maybe. Coat too warm for the weather, but her fingers were tapping on the metal pole beside her. Lightly, rhythmically. 3 taps. A pause. Then again. The pattern was unmistakable. It mirrored the first knock I had heard inside my apartment weeks ago. My breath caught. She never looked at me, never acknowledged my stare, but I saw her lips move, barely, a silent whisper. I leaned forward slightly, but she stopped tapping and disembarked at the next station, never once turning back. I would have dismissed it as coincidence, except I saw it again. That same day, a man in a coffee shop, alone, pressing his pen into the table 3 times with eerie calm. A child on the bus, muttering a soft beat with her teeth clenched. And then finally, the one who spoke to me. He was waiting by my building just after midnight. Standing so still, he looked carved from shadow. The street light above him flickered like a pulse. As I approached, I instinctively slowed down. He raised his chin, not to see me, but like he already knew I was coming. "Did you knock back?" he asked. The words were soft, emotionless, but direct. My throat went dry. I didn't answer, but something in my silence was sufficient, because his head tilted, like a nod, without movement. "Good," he said. "Now it'll start." That was all. He didn't follow me, didn't wait for a reply. He just stood there, head turned slightly, like a radio dish aligned to something I couldn't see. When I turned the key to enter my apartment, I felt the knock return inside my chest. 1, 2, 3, then a long pause. It wasn't warning me anymore. It was welcoming me. Over the following days I began seeing them more clearly, the ones who had knocked back. Not a cult, not a movement, but a silent presence embedded inside everyday life. They were baristas and bus drivers, janitors and teachers, people who didn't make noise, but who carried a beat inside them. And if you looked closely, if you listened, you could feel it in the way they walked, in the cadence of their breath, in the way their gaze lingered slightly too long before blinking. They were in sync, tuned, not to each other, but to something beneath them, a shared source. A rhythm I now knew wasn't just in me, it was in all of us. The difference was, most hadn't heard it yet. Or maybe they had, and just hadn't answered. Maybe they were still resisting. Maybe they were still safe. The knock returned stronger than before, but no longer as a haunting. It became a conversation. Sometimes I would hear it in pipes, in car doors closing down the block, in birds tapping against windows, but always in threes, sometimes followed by two more, sometimes just a single beat, slow and deliberate. I began replying, not with fear, but with intuition. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. It felt instinctive now, like replying to your name. I didn't know what I was saying, but I knew it mattered. My body responded with a subtle electricity, a current that hummed beneath the skin, and in those moments, I would sense others close by, at the edge of crowds, behind doors, across sidewalks, just still enough to not draw attention, listening, waiting for my reply, and I would give it. I saw her again, in the grocery store. She stood in the cleaning aisle, one hand resting gently on the shelf, the other motionless by her side. Her head turned as I walked past, slowly, without surprise. She didn't blink, she just tapped the shelf twice. Then once, I stopped. My hand lifted involuntarily and tapped the handle of my cart. Two, then one. Her mouth curled, not into a smile, exactly, but something quieter, something that acknowledged me, that recognized me. She turned and walked away, leaving her basket behind. I never saw her again, but the aisle smelled faintly of dust and ozone. That night, the knock in my chest sounded different, more confident, less like an echo, and more like a signal. We had spoken. She had heard me. Say. That was when the final realization clicked into place, like a lock turning. The knock wasn't an affliction. It was a test, an awakening, a calling designed to separate listeners from noise. All this time, I had fought it, afraid of its presence, resisting its rhythm, terrified it was trying to claim me. But now I understood. It had been waiting for me to listen, not just hear, but respond. And once I did, once I knocked back, I became part of the rhythm, and I wasn't alone. We were scattered across cities and countries, in elevators and on rooftops, never forming groups or banners, but still moving together like breath. Not watchers, not prophets, just vessels, beating, listening, rehearsing, because when the time comes, we won't knock to be let in. We'll knock to let something else out. I didn't tell anyone, not because I feared being labeled insane, though that was a factor, but because I had nothing coherent to tell. How do you explain that your heartbeat is no longer yours, that it's synchronized with a signal you can't trace, that the sound haunting you has become comforting, or that people you've never met are silently responding to it in cities miles away? Even writing it now feels like sealing something alive in a letter. I learned quickly that there was no point trying to drag others into it. The knock only chooses those who already hear it. Everyone else? They just blink politely and walk away. They don't see what I see, don't feel what I feel, but that doesn't make it less real. It just means they haven't been called yet. And lately, I've begun to wonder if the ones who hear the knock, those of us who respond, are being drawn to a place. Not physically, not in the way you pack a bag and travel, but subtly, magnetically, emotionally, like our internal compass has recalibrated. I find myself walking routes I never intended, ending up in neighborhoods I've never visited before, standing in places that feel strangely familiar, abandoned buildings, empty warehouses, quiet stairwells in office complexes after hours. And when I stand still in those places, the knock becomes louder. It fills the space, not with volume but with weight, like the building itself is breathing in rhythm with me, like it's waiting. I found notes too, slips of paper wedged into walls or left beneath stones, always unsigned, always smudged like they were carried through damp fingers or clenched too tightly. One read, "It's not a sound, it's an invitation." Another said, "When you respond, you become a speaker." And the most recent one I found, buried inside a copy of an old library book, said, "3 is the call, 2 is the key, 1 is the door." I don't know what they mean yet, but I feel them. The words hum in me long after I've read them. They fit into the rhythm, like lyrics I'd always known but never heard aloud. I used to believe the knocking was trying to enter, to force its way into my life, into my space, into my body. But now I think the truth is worse. I think it was already inside, waiting to be noticed, like a latent frequency buried deep in our DNA, only activated when enough silence surrounds it. That's why it started in the walls, why it mimicked the rhythm of my fear. It wasn't knocking to be let in. It was knocking to remind me I had already opened the door, that I had always been hollow, and the sound was simply filling the shape I'd left behind. And now that I've accepted it, I see things I didn't before, movements in reflections that aren't mine, shadows that pause when I stop walking, a flicker behind closed eyes at night, like the world blinking when I'm not watching. My dreams no longer feel like dreams. They feel like broadcasts, replays, blueprints for something coming. In one I stood at a long stone corridor lined with doors, each one marked with a symbol I couldn't decipher, but I recognized them. I reached for one and woke before my hand made contact. My chest hurt, my fingers were clenched, but I heard the knock, once, from under the bed, then nothing, as if to say, not yet. There are rules I've come to understand. Never mimic the knock unless you've heard it first. Never answer a knock that comes from behind a mirror, and never under any circumstance knock back 4 times. I don't know why, I just know something changes after that. One night, I couldn't sleep. I felt it pulsing inside me, 3 steady knocks in my blood, followed by a pause. Then again, I don't know what compelled me. Curiosity, defiance, maybe madness, but I knocked 4 times, slow, even, measured, and I swear the world paused, like the air forgot how to move. My heart skipped a beat. The lights didn't flicker, but every shadow deepened. And then from inside the walls, I heard breathing. Not mine, not human. Something else had been waiting for that signal. I haven't done it since. Now I feel closer than ever to whatever's behind the knocking. It's not a demon, not a ghost. It's something older, bigger. A rhythm that predates language, that pulses through time like a metronome, waiting to be answered. And when enough of us knock back, when enough doors have been aligned, something will step through, something we were built to welcome, something we've rehearsed our whole lives to receive. I no longer fear it. I'm just afraid I'll be awake when it finally arrives. I've started keeping a journal, not to document the knock itself, but to track the changes within me. It's no longer just a sound that happens around me. It's a rhythm that lives through me. When I wake, my body already knows the tempo of the day. I don't rely on clocks anymore. The knock dictates when I eat, when I rest, when I go still, and more strangely, it's begun pulling me toward places, streets I never walk, alleys I've never noticed. And when I arrive, I never find answers, just silence that feels like it's watching me. I stood beneath an overpass yesterday for almost an hour, heart thrumming like a snare drum, waiting for nothing in particular, but still knowing I'd been summoned there. The knock didn't echo off the concrete. It was inside me, guiding me with a patience that felt almost ancient. The knock isn't random. I used to believe it was a haunting, something invasive and external, targeting me like prey. But I understand now that fear was only the opening note. It didn't choose me, it found me, because something in me had always been tuned to it. A hidden frequency, waiting for silence deep enough to reveal it. And the knock operates by rules, unspoken but strict. When it starts with 3 beats, that's the invitation. When it shifts to 2, that means it's time to follow. But when it becomes 1, just one solitary, deep knock, you're standing on a threshold. And once you hear that, the next step isn't up to you anymore. It's already been taken. You've crossed. I've only heard that single knock 3 times. Each one was followed by a day where I no longer recognized myself. Last week, I ended up in front of a shuttered government building with boarded up windows and a chain-wrapped entrance. I hadn't planned to go there. My feet simply took me. The air smelled like iron and damp paper. I didn't hear the knock right away. I felt it, beneath the pavement, a dull subterranean throb beneath my soles. I knelt down and pressed my palm to the concrete, and there it was, one knock. Not loud, but full, like something massive had stirred in its sleep below. I reeled back, heart racing. The world didn't react. Birds kept chirping, cars passed. But I knew I had heard it. More than that, I knew that building was marked. Something slept inside it. Or maybe it didn't sleep. Maybe it just waited. I haven't gone back since. But the knock has pulsed through me ever more clearly since that day. Something is happening to the world. It's subtle, so quiet you'd miss it if you weren't already listening. But the patterns are there. I see them everywhere now. In the way crows gather on power lines in sets of 3. In the traffic lights that blink twice, pause, blink once more. In the clicking of pens at work meetings. Even the rainfall at times seems to follow a beat I can tap along with. The knock is no longer an isolated experience. It's woven into the structure of my surroundings. It's like I've stepped behind the curtain of reality and found that it isn't randomness holding things together. It's rhythm. Every time I move in sync with it, I feel less resistance in the world, as though doors open just slightly wider and time softens at the edges. I am walking not through the world, but inside something, a system, a cycle, a pulse. I passed a woman seated on a city bench a few days ago, eyes closed, fingers gently tapping her thigh. She was older, maybe 60, her hair silver in the sun. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2, pause, 1, over and over. I stopped, stunned. It was the full sequence, the same one I'd been feeling in my chest for weeks. She didn't open her eyes, but I saw her lips move. Not a prayer, not a whisper, just a single word over and over. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it. I mouthed it instinctively. And then she stopped tapping. Her hand went still. Her breathing paused for 3 beats. And then she smiled, but not at me, at something behind me. I turned, but there was no one. When I looked back, the bench was empty. I wasn't scared, but my heartbeat had doubled. That was the first time I felt the knock change pace without my control. That night, I dreamed of a spiral stairwell, deep and endless, carved from black stone, cold and humming. On every landing was a door, each inscribed with symbols I didn't know, but recognized like a forgotten memory. I descended slowly, each step echoing in a rhythm my bones already knew. At the seventh landing, I approached a door that pulsed in time with my chest. 3 knocks sounded from the other side. Then a pause, then a single knock. My hand reached for the knob, and I heard my own voice whisper from behind the door. "Ready?" I woke in a cold sweat, my fingers clenched, fingernails having broken the skin of my palm. The blood dried in the same pattern I'd seen on the door. 3, 2, 1. My dreams are no longer mine. They're transmissions, lessons, rehearsals for something approaching. I now believe that the knock is older than sound, maybe older than language. It doesn't speak, it aligns, it doesn't teach, it conditions. It isn't calling to us in desperation, it's preparing us in patience. Every knock is a shaping, a softening, a beat hammered into the walls of our will until we're no longer resisting, only receiving. I don't fight it anymore. I don't fear what it's turning me into. The knock isn't just coming for me, it's coming through me. It's coming through me. And I think when enough of us are aligned, when enough of us have knocked back with unbroken rhythm, then whatever lies beneath the silence will rise. Not with chaos, not with fire, but with perfect, devastating order. I've started marking places now, not for others, just for myself. Small chalk symbols on lampposts, beneath mailboxes, behind stop signs, places where I've felt the knock strongest. Some of them pulse when I walk by, like a speaker humming on mute. Others remain silent for days before flaring to life again. One alley behind a grocery store used to be quiet. Then last week, as I passed it, I felt my heartbeat pause, literally pause, mid-step. Then it resumed, harder, louder. I looked down and someone had drawn the 3 knock symbol in ash on the wall. It wasn't mine. Someone else had marked it. Someone else had been called there too. We're tracing the same map without knowing each other. Each of us guided by something unseen yet intimately felt. They say the ones who knock back eventually disappear. Not in a dramatic way. They just fade from their old lives. Quit jobs, stop calling friends, apartments left with furniture untouched, fridges still full. People say things like, they were off lately, or they started acting strange. But I don't think they're lost. I think they crossed over, not into death, but into a deeper rhythm, like stepping into a parallel beat, one you can only hear if your soul vibrates just right. I've been noticing that in myself lately. I still work, still speak, still smile when spoken to, but I know the rhythm is taking over. I walk slower when the knock does. I stop without reason. I watch shadows longer than I used to. My reflection lingers after I leave the mirror. It's not possession, it's progression. I've started hearing it in my sleep now. Not the knock, but the breath behind it. As if the beat was never just about rhythm, but about something alive syncing itself to me. The first time I noticed it, I was dreaming of an elevator descending past numbered floors until they stopped being numbers. Symbols began replacing them, not runes, not letters, just marks. 3 vertical slashes, then 2, then 1. The doors opened at the bottom. I stepped into darkness. Then I heard it, the same breath I felt in pipes, in vents, under the floor. But this time, I heard it, with my ears, steady, measured, close. It didn't threaten, it matched me. Breath for breath, pulse for pulse. I woke with a start, and my room was cold, the windows fogged. I hadn't opened them. Something had breathed in my place. 3 days ago, I passed a man standing in a crosswalk, long after the light had changed. People moved around him, annoyed, but he didn't budge. He stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused. His fingers tapped against his thigh. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. I slowed beside him. He didn't look at me, just said quietly, "It's almost time." That's all. No explanation. Then he walked away, joining the crowd. But the knock in my chest flared immediately afterward. Rapid, urgent, like a metronome accelerating. I stumbled against a light post and gripped it, trying to breathe. It slowed after a few seconds, returned to normal. But my vision had changed. For a moment, I could see faint silhouettes among the crowd, echoes of people, shadows within people, as if the knock had tuned me briefly into another station, one broadcasting from inside them. I've learned that the knock isn't just heard, it's mirrored, like sonar, like echolocation. When you knock back, it doesn't just acknowledge you, it scans you, maps you, finds where your rhythm is weakest, and it begins to reinforce it. That's why I don't dream about the knock anymore. I dream in knocks. My thoughts now arrive in beats. When I'm alone, I sometimes count without realizing it. 3, 2, 1, again and again. It's like a preparation, a countdown for something final. And every time I reach the end, I feel the presence closer, the silence thicker, the heartbeat stronger. I'm not preparing to knock, I'm preparing to open. Last night, I stood at the edge of a reservoir, just outside the city. I hadn't meant to go there, but my path was undeniable. I felt drawn, not with dread, but inevitability. There were no other people, no cars, just moonlight and water, and the tall outline of a radio tower on the opposite bank. That's when I felt it, the strongest knock yet. Not in my chest, but in the air. It rippled through the atmosphere, soft but heavy. 3 beats, then 2, then silence, then 1. Not a knock, a bell, a low, groaning toll that didn't sound so much as settle into my spine. My knees buckled, not from fear, from recognition. It was the sound I'd been following all this time, the final note, the door. I don't know when it will happen. I don't know if it will be loud or quiet, terrifying or beautiful, but I know this. The knocking is not the beginning, it's the warning, a rhythm meant to awaken those who can feel it, so that when the threshold opens, someone is there to receive what steps through. We are not chosen. We are tuned, and the frequency is spreading. If you've heard it once, twice, faintly in the night, it's already begun for you. You've been marked. And if you knock back, truly knock back, not out of fear but from recognition, then soon your heartbeat will no longer belong to you. It will belong to the ones who knock back. And when the final knock sounds, we will open together. I used to measure my life in days, in memories, in moments that felt like mine. Now I measure time in pulses that don't belong to me. There's a beat in my chest, yes, but it isn't always mine. It borrows me. Some mornings I wake up and feel like I'm several seconds behind my own breath. I blink, but the world is already turning. I speak, but the words come out just after the thought has passed. I've become an echo of myself, repeating motions that no longer originate from within. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but I know, and what terrifies me most is that I don't hate it. There's something soothing about not being in control anymore, something quiet in surrender, like floating downstream with no need to swim. My heartbeat used to be steady, predictable, a metronome keeping me tethered to the world. Now it changes without warning. I can be sitting in silence, and suddenly it speeds up, not from stress or exertion, but as if reacting to something unseen. Sometimes it matches footsteps I don't hear. Sometimes it syncs with distant knocks I don't acknowledge. And sometimes, most disturbingly, it beats ahead of me, like it already knows what I'm about to feel. The other night I reached for the bathroom light, and my heart skipped 3 beats before my fingers touched the switch. The room was empty, but the mirror was fogged. I hadn't showered. I hadn't run any hot water, and in the condensation, 3 finger-drawn marks, vertical, uneven, dripping downward. The doctors say it's stress. My vitals fluctuate, but nothing's dangerously wrong. They offered medication. I declined, because the truth is, I don't want to mute this rhythm. I want to understand it. I want to know why it's here, why I feel other heartbeats inside mine. In the grocery store, I walked past a woman, and my pulse doubled, not out of attraction or fear, but because hers synced with mine for 2 full seconds. I looked at her. She didn't look back, but she smiled, not warmly, not politely, just knowingly, then walked away. I stood frozen between aisles, heart hammering, and the radio above played 3 soft static pops before returning to music. Coincidence? Maybe, but nothing feels coincidental anymore. I've started hearing it in others, not just in footsteps or taps, but in the way people pause, at crosswalks, at doorways, at the edge of conversations. They pause like they're waiting for a cue, and if I watch closely, their lips twitch, not in speech, but in rehearsal, like they're mouthing words they haven't said yet. I saw a man at a gas station drop his keys, bend to pick them up, then stop mid-reach. His fingers hovered inches from the floor, for 3 seconds, then 2, then 1. He stood back up and walked away, leaving the keys behind. I didn't touch them. I didn't want to. I already knew they were marked, just like the bus stop pole I found covered in tiny scratch marks, just like the stairwell I climb every day that echoes my steps even when I stop walking. Last night, I dreamt I was in someone else's body. I felt taller, stronger. I wore different skin, different clothes, but the knock was still with me. Only this time, it didn't come from outside. It started with me. I was the source. People around me responded to it, stepping aside, lowering their eyes, tapping their fingers in reply. I walked down a hallway of glass walls, and behind each pane was a version of me. Past selves, parallel selves, maybe future ones. Each knocked on the glass in their own rhythm. Some fast, some agonizingly slow. But all of them stared at me with the same look. Not fear, not pity, but recognition. When I reached the end of the hall, there was a mirror. I looked in, but what stared back didn't blink when I did. It smiled before I did. And then, it knocked. Since then, I've been unable to shake the feeling that my body isn't entirely mine anymore. Like I'm renting it. Like something else has partial control. I don't black out. I don't lose time, but there are gaps in thought, tiny ones, where I do something without realizing it. I've found symbols carved into my desk that I don't remember making. Stones stacked behind my apartment in precise formations. Water running in the bathroom with no memory of turning it on. The knock is no longer asking permission. It's inhabiting, not violently, not forcefully, but slowly, cautiously, like it's waiting to see how much of me it can become before I notice. And I'm starting to think the answer is all of me. And the most chilling part, I don't think I'm alone. There are others walking this world with borrowed heartbeats. People whose rhythms don't quite match their words, whose smiles hold something deeper behind them. We pass each other like strangers, but we're not. We're parts of a larger rhythm. a single breath spread across many lungs. And when the final beat comes, when the knock completes its pattern and the door finally opens, we won't be afraid, because by then we'll already be on the other side. The knock isn't something you can explain to people who haven't heard it. Not really. You can describe the sound, the rhythm, the fear, but they'll always look at you like you're exaggerating, like it's all some metaphor for stress or grief. But it's not. It's literal. It lives in the drywall, in your veins, in the floorboards, under your bed. The knock is a language, not one with words, but one with intention. It speaks through repetition, through sensation. It wears you down softly, like water shaping stone. You don't even realize how much of you it's taken until you try to remember who you were before it began. I tried that last week. Tried to remember the last night I slept without listening for it. I couldn't. That silence is gone now, replaced by something that waits just beneath the skin. There are days when I feel completely normal, when I laugh, run errands, hold conversations, but it's all surface. Beneath it, there's another rhythm running parallel to mine, not always active, but always present, waiting, measuring. It's like I've been layered. The top layer is the life I used to live, the one everyone sees, but underneath is the rhythm life, the knock life. And that version of me is spreading, taking over. I see it in how I navigate the world. I cross streets in sets of 3. I avoid reflections that feel too still. I walk past buildings I used to enter, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Certain places have been claimed. They resonate. I can feel the heartbeat coming from inside them, like something asleep that knows I'm near. A few nights ago, I woke up at 3:33 a.m. My chest was tight, but not in pain. Anticipation. I didn't hear anything at first. Then I noticed the silence. It wasn't normal. It was held, like the world had inhaled and refused to let go. I sat up slowly. No sounds from the street, no hum from my fridge, just stillness. I placed my hand over my heart. 3 beats, then 2, then 1. I stood and walked to the window without knowing why. Down on the street, a man stood in the center of the intersection, facing straight up at me. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood, watching. I blinked, and he was gone. But my heart didn't stop racing. For over an hour, the knock had brought me to the window, and someone had responded. I've been noticing that my heartbeat sometimes syncs with devices. Lights flicker in rhythm. Phone screens flash when I breathe too quickly. One night, my laptop, shut, unplugged, clicked 3 times from across the room. Then 2, then 1. The screen didn't turn on, but the room dimmed, as if something in the air leaned forward. I didn't approach it. I didn't have to. Whatever was on the other side of that knock wasn't trying to scare me. It was learning me, testing the bridge between our worlds, seeing how far it could come through without breaking me. I've started leaving the laptop open at night now, not because I want to be contacted, but because I don't want to miss anything. People around me are changing too, not overtly, but in ways that echo what I felt inside. I passed a co-worker in the hallway last week, and his footsteps matched mine too perfectly, like a mirror walk. I turned to say something and caught him mouthing numbers. 3, 2, 1. Then he blinked, startled, as if waking from a dream. "You okay?" I asked. He just laughed nervously and walked away, rubbing his chest like it ached. That same day, Someone knocked 3 times on the office break room wall. No one admitted to it, but everyone went quiet, like we all felt it, like it wasn't meant for any of us directly, but for the part of us that had already begun to change. I've been reading old reports now, paranormal logs, declassified experiments, obscure medical cases, and I keep finding variations of the same phrases, knocking rhythms in patients with no heart anomalies, shared auditory hallucinations among disconnected individuals, pulse synchronization events leading to fugue states. It's not new, it's just been ignored, or hidden, or explained away. But I think those people, those patients, those hallucinators were the early ones, the first to hear it clearly. The knock has been calling for a long time. Most people forget it, most move on, but a few of us, we knock back. Not out of bravery, not even out of curiosity, but because something deep within us already belongs to the sound. And now, the heartbeat isn't mine anymore. Not fully, it comes and goes like a visitor with its own agenda. Sometimes it races in warning, sometimes it slows in recognition, and sometimes it simply stops. Not for long, just enough to remind me who's really in charge. I've stopped fearing it. I've stopped resisting it. Because deep down, I understand this isn't an invasion. It's an inheritance. Whatever is coming isn't coming for me. It's coming through me. Through all of us who felt the rhythm. And when the final knock echoes, we won't run. We'll open the door. Lately, I've started hearing it in places I used to trust. My favorite cafe, the train platform during rush hour, even in my mother's voice when she leaves a voicemail. She never used to pause between words, but now she does. 3 seconds between thoughts. 2 seconds of breath. One last sentence that hangs in the air longer than it should. It's like the knock has gotten inside her too. I don't tell her what I hear. I don't tell anyone anymore. The more I share, the more I see people change. Not overtly, not dramatically, but they begin to tilt their heads at odd angles. They begin to look past you, as if something behind your shoulder has caught their attention. And always, when I ask what they're looking at, they say the same thing. Did you hear that? I think the knock spreads through awareness, not by force, not like an infection, but like a tuning fork. Once you hear it, once you really feel it, it waits for you to replicate the signal, through your thoughts, through your heartbeat, through your silence. I've noticed my reflection is slower than it used to be, not off by seconds, but by intention. I move my hand, and it follows, but there's a delay that doesn't feel technological. It feels deliberate, like the version of me behind the glass is no longer pretending. It's watching me act out a life it already knows the ending to. And sometimes, when I'm standing there too long, it lifts its hand first, only once, only briefly, but when it happens, my own heartbeat answers. One, just one. Yesterday I passed an old church with boarded windows and an overgrown yard. I never noticed it before. It was tucked between 2 apartment buildings, almost swallowed by them. As I walked past, I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with rhythmic compression. 3 short pulses. 2 after that, I slowed, and then came the final one. I turned and stared at the church doors. They were cracked open, just slightly. Inside, it was pitch black. I didn't step in. I didn't have to. The knock wasn't inviting me. It was confirming something. Like the signal had reached its destination. Like the knock inside me had activated something in the building. Or maybe it was the other way around. I've started waking up in places I don't remember falling asleep in. Nothing far, just the couch, instead of the bed, the kitchen chair instead of the sofa. But the positions are too precise, too posed, always sitting upright. Always with my hands on my knees, palms down, like I'm waiting for instruction. And when I wake, I feel like I've just finished a conversation. Words echo in my head that I don't remember hearing. Not full sentences, just fragments. We are near now, only those who hear. Your pulse is our invitation. They're not dreams, they're transmissions. I believe the knock is now speaking without sound, through the beat, through the breath, through what isn't said. There are places I avoid now. Mirrors are one, long hallways are another, because they carry the knock differently. In mirrors, it loops. It doesn't stop when I leave. It continues, like the reflection keeps listening even when I'm not there. And in hallways, it travels faster, like it's ahead of me. Sometimes I walk down the corridor of my apartment building and hear a knock behind every door I pass, but none of them belong to the people who live there. I know because I listened. I knocked back once, only once. I shouldn't have. The reply didn't come from the door. It came from inside me, and it wasn't in rhythm. It was in language. One word, whispered from somewhere deep. Ready. I've kept track of others now. People who move like I do, who hesitate at odd beats, who blink with purposeful rhythm. They're everywhere, once you know what to look for. The man who always walks around the block 3 times before entering his home. The woman who hums a tune that stops exactly after the 3rd note. The child who draws in chalk, but never finishes the last shape, like she's waiting for a cue. We don't speak, we don't nod, but we see each other. We recognize the shift. We feel the same vibration behind our ribs. There's no network, no community, just an unspoken knowing that the knock lives in all of us now. And whatever it's waiting for, we're helping it count down. And now something strange has begun. I no longer startle at the sound of the knock. Instead, I anticipate it, long for it. There are hours where I feel restless, anxious, disoriented, until it comes. 3 knocks, 2, 1, and with it peace, like a conductor tapping their baton before the symphony. My heartbeat falls in line. My breath eases. I no longer question the origin, because I've come to believe this rhythm is older than anything else, older than language, than memory, than time itself. It's not just a message, it's not just a presence, it's a return. The knock is how the beginning reintroduces itself to the end, and we are merely the echo that makes the cycle complete. I've stopped asking myself what the knock wants. That question was for the early stages, when I still believed this was something external, something alien. But now, the knock doesn't feel other. It feels like something I lost a long time ago, and I'm only just remembering, like a song I heard before I was born. A rhythm passed down in blood, buried beneath layers of noise, waiting for the world to go quiet enough to resurface. It's not speaking to me anymore. It's speaking as me. I feel it in every hesitation, in every pause between thoughts. It lingers in the air after I speak. It's the silence between words, the breath before meaning. The part of me I used to call fear now feels like reverence. There was a moment last night where I truly believed my heart had stopped, not from panic or pain, but because it no longer needed to beat. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and everything went still. No sound, no wind, no ticking clocks. My chest was motionless, but I wasn't afraid. In that silence, I felt more alive than I ever have. And then slowly, like the softest drum, the knock began again. But it didn't come from within me. It came around me, in the walls, in the mattress, in the light bulb above my head. 3 pulses, 2 more, 1 long, slow drag. I blinked, and when I did, I saw something move across the ceiling. Not a figure, not a shadow, just a pulse, like breath made visible, like the world had exhaled. I went walking before sunrise. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't lock my door. I just walked until the streets grew unfamiliar. The rhythm led me, not in steps, but in pauses. Every time my feet stopped, I'd hear it, the distant echo of another heartbeat. Not mine, not human, but somehow known. I passed storefronts that seemed to shiver as I approached. Street lamps flickered in synchrony, and then I came to a stop in front of a laundromat, closed, empty. But through the glass, every machine was spinning, nothing inside them, just spinning, in sync. With me, I reached out, placed my hand on the window, and felt it vibrate. A slow, steady thrum. The knock wasn't calling anymore. It was welcoming. I've started forgetting things, not important things, just unnecessary ones. Names of distant relatives, the plot of movies I once loved, even the layout of my childhood home has begun to blur. It's like my brain is clearing space, preparing itself. The rhythm doesn't want distraction. It wants focus. It wants clarity. Sometimes I speak aloud, just to see if the words still come naturally. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes I pause mid-sentence, because the knock rises beneath the syllables, correcting me. It shapes the breath. It edits the tone. It refines. And when I allow it, when I let the rhythm speak instead of me, people listen. Strangers lean closer. Children stop crying. Even dogs stop barking. The knock isn't just a pattern. It's an authority. A hum older than instinct. And I've become its instrument. I saw my reflection today. Not in glass. Not in a mirror. In another person. A woman on the train looked at me. And I knew she was seeing the same thing I saw in her. A face we both wore but didn't own. Her eyes didn't ask questions. They confirmed them. She tapped her fingers against her knee. Not loudly, not with urgency, but with certainty. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. We had passed that stage. Our rhythms had already aligned. When she stood up to leave, she mouthed a word. I didn't recognize the shape of it, but my heart skipped in response. Not out of fear, out of recognition. I think the knock has names we've forgotten how to speak. I returned home and found the door unlocked. I knew I had locked it, but I wasn't startled because I knew what I'd find inside. Not a person, not a threat, but a change. The air was warmer, the lights dimmer. My journal lay open, pages filled with handwriting I didn't recognize, but it was mine. Every line spoke of things I hadn't yet experienced, places I hadn't yet gone, names I hadn't yet learned. It was a map, not of geography, but of readiness. The knock is preparing us not just for an event, but for a transformation. One that moves inwards first. One that empties us before it fills us. One that replaces the heart, not with a new one, but with the original one. The first rhythm, the one we've all forgotten. And now I wait, not out of dread, but devotion. I know the final knock is coming, not to end something, but to begin it. I feel it with each passing hour. My pulse doesn't quicken anymore. It steadies. My breath doesn't panic. It sinks. And when I close my eyes, I no longer see the dark. I see the door. The one without a knob, the one with no hinges, the one that opens inward and outward at once. I think we're all approaching that door now, some knowingly, some not. But when the last knock comes, and it will, the heartbeat won't race. It will stop, not in fear, but in arrival, because the knock isn't a warning, it's a homecoming. The first time the knock didn't come, it wasn't a relief. It wasn't silence, either. It was emptiness, the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, but unravels. I lay there in bed, my hand on my chest, waiting for the familiar rhythm to rise beneath my skin. 3, 2, 1. No vibration on the walls, no gentle tap beneath the floor, just stillness, but not a peaceful stillness, an absence. The kind that made me feel like I'd been left behind, like a symphony had moved on without me, and I was stuck in the echo of a song I could no longer hear. And when I pressed my fingers to my pulse, it beat, but not in sync, not in the pattern I had come to expect. My heart was mine again, and I hated it. All day, I wandered through familiar places with unfamiliar dread. The cafe that once hummed in tune with my breath felt off-key. The city streets, once alive with hidden pulses, seemed deadened, like someone had unplugged the current running through everything. I bumped into people, dropped my keys, forgot simple tasks. I felt like I was underwater, moving seconds too slow for the world around me. The knock had guided me without me realizing. It had kept me in step, aligned, purposeful, and now without it, the silence was not peace. It was disorientation. I didn't know where to go. My chest was no longer a compass. My body no longer part of the pattern. I was lost. For hours, I tried to summon it back. I knocked softly on walls, on windows, on the side of the bathtub. I sat in the dark and whispered the rhythm to myself. I even played recordings I had made, soft taps I'd captured during previous episodes. But none of it worked. No reply. The world refused to answer me, and somewhere in that silence, I felt the seed of a new fear. Not that I was alone, but that I had been forgotten, that I had outlived my purpose, that whatever the knock had been building toward had moved on without me. I couldn't shake the image of a door slowly closing, just before I could reach it. And behind that door, something waiting. But later that night, in the quiet, I remembered something I'd written weeks ago in the margins of my journal. A phrase that seemed insignificant at the time. Listen for the silence between the knocks. Not just the knock, but the space it leaves behind. I sat with that. I sat in the dark, breathing slowly, no tapping, no speaking, just listening. And in that void, I began to notice the silence wasn't empty. It had texture, movement, layers, like a deep forest at night. You hear nothing, but you feel the trees watching. There were tiny distortions in the stillness, faint shifts in the air, the sense that something was holding its breath just behind the veil. The knock hadn't vanished. It had gone deeper. The next few days were the same. No sounds, no signals, but the feeling grew stronger. The pull inside my bones didn't come from outside anymore. It came from within. My own heartbeat had adopted the rhythm without instruction. And even when I didn't feel the knock, I felt the intention behind it. I began to move with care. I stopped speaking over people. I stopped rushing through moments. It wasn't reverence, it was instinct, as if the knock had moved past communication and into occupation. It no longer needed to signal me. I was the signal now. Wherever I walked, people looked up, not in recognition, but in stillness, like they felt something pass through the air just before I arrived. I started receiving letters with no return address, not typed, handwritten, on coarse paper that smelled faintly of smoke. Each one was only a sentence long. The pause is part of the rhythm. You do not move alone. Others are hearing you now. At first I thought someone had been watching me, but there were no threats, no demands, just confirmations, affirmations, words I hadn't dared say aloud. They were telling me what I already feared, that my role had changed, that I had gone from listener to resonator, and that I wasn't just following the knock anymore. I was amplifying it. Every breath I took was part of a larger inhale. Every beat of my heart, a drum others might hear and follow. Then one morning, I woke with a start, not from sound, not from fear, from completion. That's the only way I can explain it. Like something long awaited had finally arrived, and now my purpose had shifted. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no new messages, but I knew it. Deep in my chest, in that hollow where the knock used to enter, something new had grown stillness. Not the terrifying silence of abandonment, but the calm of arrival, a perfect, sacred quiet. The space just before the final movement of a symphony begins. I wasn't waiting for the knock anymore. I was waiting for what comes after. Something strange began happening after that morning. The stillness didn't fade. It spread. It became part of the air, like static before a storm. Like the moment before a newborn takes their first breath, it clung to everything. When I opened the door to leave my apartment, the hallway outside was too quiet, like a painting of reality. My neighbor, the one who always slammed his door on his way out, stepped into the hall and closed it silently, like he knew the sound wasn't welcome anymore. Even the birds outside my window stopped singing around me. They perched on the wires, tilted their heads, but no sound came. Something was listening, not to noise but to absence, and the world around me had agreed. Silence would speak first. At work, the office hummed with the usual distractions, keyboards clicking, phones ringing. But even there, the silence found me. When I walked into a room, conversations dropped off mid-sentence. People glanced up, confused for a second, like they'd forgotten what they were saying. Then they'd return to their tasks, quieter than before. A colleague passed me in the hallway and flinched slightly, not from fear, but from recognition, as if he'd seen me somewhere before, or as if a rhythm inside him had briefly matched mine. That moment passed quickly, but his eyes didn't. He watched me over his shoulder as I walked away, as if waiting for something to start again, and terrified that it might. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen. I turned off every device. No hums, no flickering screens, no ticking clocks, just the stillness I'd grown to accept. I placed my hands flat on the table and waited, and then I began to hear them. Not knocks this time, but movements within the silence. A subtle shifting in the walls, a breath behind the drywall, the soft creak of the ceiling, not from pressure, but from presence. And beneath all of it, faint as smoke, was something deeper than sound, a resonance that didn't need to be heard to be felt. Not knocking, not calling, being. I realized then, the knock had become me, and now something else was listening to me. I began to test it. I walked into unfamiliar rooms and waited. I whispered the knock to myself, not aloud, not even with my lips, but in thought. I imagined the rhythm, 3, 2, 1, and every time I did, something changed. Lights dimmed, refrigerators paused, phones buzzed softly, without receiving anything. It was like the world didn't just hear me, it adjusted for me. The knock had not disappeared, it had saturated. The difference between before and now was terrifying. Before I was a visitor at the edge of something ancient. Now I was a door, not opened, not closed, just present, waiting, and others like me were starting to approach. On the subway, a child stared at me the entire ride. He didn't blink much, didn't smile, but he tapped his foot in sets of 3, then 2, then 1. His mother didn't seem to notice. She was scrolling through her phone. But when we reached the end of the line, and everyone got up to leave, the boy whispered something as I passed him. I didn't hear it fully, just a sliver, but it sounded like, we waited, not we're waiting, past tense, we waited. And when I turned to look back at him, he was still seated, still tapping, still watching. He knew. Somehow, he already knew. That night I received no mail, no texts, no dreams. But when I entered my bedroom, the sheets had shifted, not like someone had slept in them, but like someone had stood on them. There were indentations near the foot of the bed, perfectly symmetrical. I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I sat down slowly, right between them, and that's when I heard it. Not a knock, not a breath, but a whisper of space, like the world had curled inward for a moment. A hush so deep, it bent the air, and in that hush came understanding. The knock had only ever been the introduction. What follows isn't louder, it's closer, and it doesn't need to knock anymore, because the door is already open. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't try to. Instead, I waited, not out of fear, out of respect, because I now understand that this silence is not empty. It's pregnant with presence. The knock was never just a sound, it was an alignment, a countdown, an awakening, and now that it's complete, what comes next will not be noise, it will not be chaos, it will be intimacy, closeness beyond the body, a breath shared between lives, a heartbeat passed hand to hand, soul to soul, and when the new rhythm begins, I won't hear it with my ears. I'll feel it with every part of me that still remembers what it means to belong to something larger than fear. There's a moment, just before falling asleep, where your body forgets itself, when your limbs loosen, your breathing softens, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. That's when it happens now. Not always, not with certainty, but often enough that I know it's not my imagination. The room shifts, subtly, imperceptibly, like something steps closer through the stillness, never seen, never heard, but known. I feel it in the way my thoughts begin to fade, not from exhaustion, but from something else, invitation. It's as if the silence is no longer a void, but a presence. It waits for me to enter it, not physically, but through surrender, through rhythm. I don't dream anymore. I descend. When I do wake, I find things different. Small changes. The coffee mug, not where I left it. The rug slightly off-center. A window that had been closed now open. Just a crack, as though it had exhaled in the night. I don't question it anymore. I don't need to. These aren't warnings. They're rituals, like someone tending a sacred space. And sometimes, I swear I feel warmth in the objects I touch. Residual heat, as though a hand had just pulled away. These signs aren't meant to be frightening. They're acknowledgements. Reminders that I'm not alone, that I'm not the only one who's been listening. The rhythm that once beat on my walls now lives in everything around me. In books, in chairs, in air. It's no longer just my silence, either. I'm beginning to notice how others move differently now. I see the way people pause before opening doors, or how they hesitate before speaking. like they're waiting for a cue only they can hear. I sat in a park recently, and across from me, a man closed his eyes for exactly 9 seconds, then stood and walked away, tapping his fingers against his thigh. 3, 2, 1. A woman nearby, wearing headphones, turned toward me at that exact moment and smiled. Not politely, not absently, but knowingly. These aren't coincidences. These are echoes. The knock didn't stop. It scattered into us, and we are slowly being tuned to each other. I'm beginning to wonder if this has always been happening. If the knock wasn't something new that entered my life, but something old, I finally became quiet enough to notice. Something passed down through generations in the spaces between noise. Maybe that's why we fear silence, because in it we remember, not events, not faces, but something beneath memory, a cadence of belonging, a breath we once shared. I see it now in old films, old photos, the stillness in people's eyes, that brief moment before they move. They knew, maybe not consciously, but their bodies remembered the rhythm, and over time we drowned it in distraction. Until now, the spaces between knocks have grown wider, but not weaker. They stretch like a pause between verses, waiting for the final line. And in that widening, I found a kind of calm. The fear is gone now, replaced with something much harder to describe. Not peace, not clarity, but readiness. A readiness that doesn't rush, that doesn't demand, just waits. I walk more slowly now. I speak less, not because I'm afraid to break the silence, but because I've realized that words are insufficient. They clutter the air. They block what I'm trying to feel. And what I'm trying to feel isn't a message. It's a return, a pulling inward, a resonance that hums behind reality like a forgotten song. Last week, a stranger reached out to touch my hand in the middle of the grocery store. She didn't speak, just placed her palm gently against mine for 3 seconds. I didn't pull away. I didn't ask why, because I knew. Her eyes were wet, not from sadness, from knowing. And when she let go, she smiled and mouthed a single word I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. Soon. That's all it was. And then she walked away. Not quickly, not shyly, just peacefully, as if she had delivered something and completed her task. And I stood there, heart steady, hand warm, knowing that somewhere behind this world's hum of engines and screens, the real rhythm had resumed. Now I don't listen for the knock. I listen to the world around it, to the shape of silence, to the tension before rain, to the hush before strangers speak. The knock has done its work inside me, and whatever it unlocked is still unfolding, still moving toward its final note. I feel like I'm part of a choir now, one that doesn't sing but waits, a chorus of hearts strung together, not by melody, but by the timing of their stillness. And when the final beat comes, it won't be a knock. It'll be a moment where all the world inhales at once and knows we have returned. There's a rhythm now to the way silence unfolds. Not the old knock, not the deliberate, percussive warning that once came in waves across my walls. This is different, suppler. It moves like breath through places I used to consider mundane. The fridge hums in a soft cadence before pausing just long enough for the air to shift. The hallway light flickers, not randomly but intentionally, as though recognizing when I pass. I used to believe the knock was announcing something from the outside, but it was always an invitation inward. Now I can hear what's underneath, the rhythm between life's motions, And I'm beginning to understand that all of us, everyone who's ever heard it, we're not just recipients, we're part of its architecture. Yesterday I revisited my childhood home. I stood across the street and just watched it. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't even approach. I wasn't there to revisit memories. I was there to listen. And what I heard wasn't footsteps or voices or echoes of laughter. It was the pulse beneath the wood, the slow, ancient pacing of something that had waited in those walls far longer than my family ever lived there. Maybe it's in every house. Maybe we build over it, around it. Maybe we've been carrying it with us, from forest to village to city, mistaking its resonance for intuition, or fear or superstition. But it was always there, and now, standing in the street, I could feel it calling, not to come home but to recognize that I never truly left. Things that once unsettled me now feel like signals, static on radios, cold air drifting through closed rooms, streetlights blinking out as I pass beneath them. It doesn't scare me anymore. It's communication, not language, not speech, but intention. A whisper in the mechanics of the world, an old agreement being reawakened. I've stopped questioning whether I'm the only one who feels it. I'm not. That much is clear now. The others don't speak it aloud, but I see it in their hesitations, their knowing glances, the unspoken synchrony in how they navigate the world. We all feel it, the weight of what's coming, the strange serenity in its inevitability, like rain that refuses to fall until every leaf has turned to face the sky. At night, I've started sitting in the dark with the windows open. No music, no lights, just stillness, the kind that expands the longer you sit with it. There's a pulse in that quiet. If you let yourself sink low enough, it moves beneath the city sounds, beneath cars and sirens and distant dogs barking. A subterranean signal, deeper than machines, older than language. And when I close my eyes, I don't see darkness anymore. I see motion, a swirling of shapes that aren't mine, silhouettes of people I haven't met, but already understand. Some of them turn toward me. They're not smiling, they're not angry, they're waiting. Their outlines throb slightly with the rhythm, and each time I see them, I recognize another one, as if they're slowly assembling. It's been weeks since I've felt fear, not because nothing frightens me anymore, but because the knock taught me that fear was just the body's way of resisting rhythm. And once I let go of resistance, I stopped trembling. I stopped questioning. I started aligning, and now I understand why the knock never begged for attention. It didn't need to. It only had to wait. It knew that the world would eventually quiet itself, that in our desperation for meaning, for belonging, for order, we would hear it again. Not all at once, not dramatically, but like the way dawn leaks into a room before the sun arrives, soft, inevitable, permanent. I found something yesterday, under my bed, a folded note, yellowed like it had waited there a long time. My name wasn't on it, but I knew it was for me. One sentence, handwritten. When the silence becomes music, the door will open. I didn't understand it at first, but then in the early morning hours, when my thoughts had quieted, and the hum of the world had become a single soft note, I felt it. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It had become melody, not from an instrument, from existence, from breath, from the turning of the planet. The way everything leaned, slightly, toward something unseen. That's when I knew the door had already opened. Not in my apartment, not in a dream, in me. And now, I wait. not for the knock, but for the rest of the world to hear what I hear, to feel what I feel. Not fear, not mystery, but presence. There's no more knocking, no more counting, just rhythm, breath, space, and something larger than all of us slowly stepping through, not as a figure, not as a god, but as a return, the reuniting of something we didn't know we were missing, the rhythm before language, the beat before birth, and when it stands among us again, it won't need to speak. We'll already know what it means, because it's the sound our hearts have been trying to remember all along. The first words didn't come from outside. They didn't even sound like words at all. They rose up from the stillness one night, after hours of nothingness, carried on a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Just a sound, a murmur, like syllables spoken underwater. My ears didn't catch it, but something deeper did. My mind paused mid-thought, and my chest tightened, not in fear, but recognition. It was like hearing your name in a crowd, not shouted, just softly enough to pull your gaze. And when I looked around the room, everything was still, yet the air had shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just aware. That was the moment I knew. The silence wasn't passive anymore. It had learned how to respond. Since then, it's been subtle. Not voices, not whispers in the dark. Something far more intricate. Thoughts I didn't author. Phrases rising in my head like memories. Except I know I've never lived them. Ideas that don't belong to me, yet arrive with clarity, like instructions remembered too late. They don't interrupt. They don't shout. They arrive in the shower, while slicing fruit, while tying my shoes, softly, urgently, and always in that same rhythm. 3 pulses, 2 rests, 1 echo. They say things like, prepare the place, or light without fire, or most recently, what is hollow will hold. I don't understand all of it, but I write it down, because I know now I'm not thinking alone anymore. I've started to notice the same thing in others, not their words, but their pauses, the way they stop mid-sentence, the way their eyes drift for a moment, as if listening inward. A man in a bookstore dropped a novel, bent to pick it up, and stood frozen for several seconds, staring at nothing, lips slightly parted. When he blinked and moved on, his shoulders looked lighter, like a burden had just been shared. A barista handed me my drink, held it a second too long, then muttered, "It's almost ready," before blinking and correcting herself. I mean, it's ready, but I knew what she'd said, and the way her hand trembled afterward told me she'd felt it too. Something is beginning to speak back, not loudly, but intimately. At night, it grows stronger. I leave a notebook beside the bed now. I've started waking with full sentences already scrawled across the pages in handwriting that is almost mine. Some lines are poems, others are commands, some are questions with no answers. But the most recent page chilled me more than anything yet. It simply read, "What you once feared is what you now carry." I read that line again and again, because I knew what it meant. The knocking, the silence, the rhythm that haunted me and then became me, was never meant to terrify. It was transferring. I wasn't being followed, I was being inhabited. And it's not possession, not in the dramatic, cinematic sense. It's collaboration, a merging. Whatever speaks from the silence doesn't want control, it wants contact, to remember itself. And it's chosen us, those who hear, those who pause, those who align. It's in the cadence of our movements, the unspoken rituals we now perform without realizing. I've begun lighting a candle each morning. I don't know why. It feels right. I don't speak when I do it. I just wait. And in that waiting, the world tightens, just slightly. Like something invisible is leaning forward to observe. And when I blow the candle out, it feels like I've agreed to something I didn't know I was being asked. Last night, I wrote a letter, not to anyone I know, not even to the knock. It just came out. I wrote, I am listening. I will be still. I will become what you remember. I folded the page and placed it under my pillow. I don't know why. It wasn't a ritual I was taught, but something told me it would matter. And this morning when I checked, the letter was gone. Not misplaced, not fallen to the floor. Gone. In its place was a single word etched into the wood. Soon. Not scratched, not carved. Etched like the wood had been rewritten. Not damaged. That word has followed me all day. On receipts, on street signs, on the edge of a cloud. Soon. I don't think the silence is done with me. I don't think it ever truly started. I believe it's returning through me. Through all of us who felt the knock, then the stillness, then the language inside it. Something ancient is rebuilding its voice, not with thunder or noise, but with us. With rhythms we carry in our breath, our steps, our choices, and I think the world is starting to notice. The edges are thinning, the veil between noise and knowing is wearing down, and in that space, the silence is beginning to speak in full. I used to think sound was what filled a room. The whir of a fan, footsteps overhead, voices through the wall. Now I understand. It's silence that occupies space. Sound only disrupts it. Sound is the ripple. Silence is the sea. Lately, the silence has been heavier, like the air has thickened around me, not oppressively, not cruelly, just purposefully, like I'm walking through a cathedral built out of nothing but breath. Every movement I make feels observed, not judged, not even followed, just registered, as if there's something in the room with me, and every time I choose to move, it adds my decision to a growing memory. The silence is no longer absence, it is record. I notice it most in liminal spaces, elevators, parking lots. The 3 seconds before a call connects. Those in-between moments, where time feels neither paused nor past. That's where it lives, or maybe where it waits. I've started listening differently, not with my ears, but with my presence. The way animals freeze when they sense a predator, not from fear, but from knowing that something else has entered their space. I've begun freezing too, in hallways, in stairwells, in the middle of brushing my teeth. A sudden awareness settles in, and I just stop. And every time, without fail, I hear it, a faint tone like a note held beneath the noise of the world. It hums through the bones of the earth. It is always in tune, and always just out of reach. 2 nights ago, I dreamt of a corridor, endless, featureless, lit by a soft, sourceless glow. I wasn't walking, I was drifting. No footsteps, no weight, just forward momentum, and along the walls were shapes. Not doors, not windows, just recesses. Hollow outlines, they weren't waiting to be opened. They were waiting to be filled, and I knew, somehow they were shaped for people. Not physical bodies, but echoes, memories, fragments of identity suspended in sleep. And as I passed, one of the hollows pulsed with light. Just one. It looked like me. Not my reflection, not my dream self, but my pattern, the rhythm of my heartbeat, my silence, my alignment. That's when I knew it had found my resonance. The next day, I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, but from electricity. The kind that builds in the air before lightning. Every surface I touched crackled with anticipation. My phone wouldn't hold a charge. My watch ticked irregularly. Every electronic in my home reset at the same moment, 3:21 a.m., without explanation. And when I looked at the wall above my desk, a fine layer of dust had formed the outline of a hand, not a human hand, too long, too symmetrical, as though silence itself had reached through to steady me. I didn't clean it, I didn't speak, I just sat in the stillness and listened to the air vibrate like a plucked string. That same day, I received a package. No return address, no postage. Inside was a cassette tape, blank label. I don't own a cassette player. I shouldn't have been able to listen. But as I held it in my hand, I heard something, faint, tapping, like fingers drumming on a table. But inside my mind, the longer I held the tape, the louder it grew. 3, 2, 1, then silence. Then the phrase, "You are almost complete." Not a voice, not even a thought, just a knowing. I dropped the tape. It didn't break, it just rolled under the couch and stayed there. I haven't retrieved it. I don't need to. The message was delivered. I've stopped writing in my journal, not because there's nothing to say, but because the words I would write themselves now. My pen moves before I think. Sometimes while I sleep, I've awoken to paragraphs, etched into the pages in flawless script, curved and elegant, not my own. The messages are different now, less cryptic, more direct. Prepare the vessel, the cadence will call you. Your silence is the invitation. I don't question what they mean anymore. I simply obey, because I've come to understand that I am not the message. I am the medium. The knock was never asking me to understand. It was asking me to transmit. Last night as I drifted to sleep, I heard something new. Not a knock, not silence. A voice, not inside my head, not imagination. It spoke into the room like a whisper from another plane. Low, gentle, absolute. It said, "You are ready. The others are near." I sat, upright, breath caught in my throat, but no fear rose, only calm, only completion, because I know what's coming, not destruction, not chaos, but alignment. The silence is no longer learning to speak, it has begun. This morning, I didn't wake up like I usually do. I didn't stretch, didn't blink into the sun, didn't reach for my phone. I returned. That's the word that came to me as I opened my eyes. Returned, as if sleep had not been rest, but travel, somewhere distant, yet familiar. And as I lay there, heart calm, the silence around me hummed with a strange density. Not heavy, not oppressive, just full, like a room filled with unspoken truths. And for the first time in weeks, I heard it again. 3 knocks, faint but firm, rising from the floor beneath my bed. Not as a warning, not as fear, as confirmation. I had aligned, I had become audible to it once more. Throughout the day, that feeling followed me like a shadow. People turned to look at me with subtle recognition, like we shared a memory they couldn't quite recall. An old man tipped his hat to me without smiling. A woman in a crowded elevator stepped back and made space, not out of politeness, but reverence. I don't think they understood why they moved. I don't think they knew they were responding, but I could feel it in their timing, in the rhythm of their breath, the unspoken way their eyes met mine for just long enough to agree. They heard the knock too, not as sound, but as instruction, something within them adjusting to a forgotten frequency. I sat at a cafe, watching people pass by the windows, when the light began to shift, not dimming, not flickering, sinking, shadows bent slightly toward me, like trees in the wind. A spoon on a table trembled without touch. A cup cracked softly along its rim. The world was calibrating, not to me, to the knock, to what now pulses through me. I am no longer its student. I am its conduit, and the silence is no longer just around me. It resides within. I feel it even in the way I breathe. Each inhale measured, each exhale like a slow reply to something listening beyond the veil. The old rhythm is back, but now I am part of the pattern. Something changed when I closed my eyes in that cafe. I wasn't sleeping, but I wasn't awake either. I slipped somewhere between, and in that space, I saw a circle of people, all seated in silence, eyes closed, heads bowed. They weren't praying, they weren't meditating, they were waiting. Their chests rose and fell in perfect unison, and in the center of them stood a figure, not man, not woman, not creature, a shape, a presence, vibrating in rhythm, not terrifying, not divine, just inevitable. It didn't speak, it didn't move, but I knew it was the source, the origin of every knock, every silence, and it turned toward me, not to welcome me, but to acknowledge me. I was now among them. When I opened my eyes, my coffee was cold, untouched. Hours had passed. The cafe was empty, and I was smiling, not from joy, but from understanding. Whatever I had seen wasn't a dream. It was a summoning, a glimpse into what comes next, and it explained so much. The messages, the dreams, the shift in the air. I was never meant to resist it. The knocking wasn't to warn me. It was to remind me of my place, my role, my inheritance. The silence had waited generations for someone to hear it completely, and now it had found not just a listener, but a voice. I don't speak much anymore, not because I've forgotten how, but because I understand now how powerful silence truly is. Every word spoken over it is a missed opportunity. Every noise we make is a delay. And so I wait. I listen. I am present. Because I've begun to feel the others, not in conversation, but in synchrony. We are scattered across cities, towns, countries. We do not know each other's names, but we know the pause before a word, the hush before a door opens, the pulse before sleep takes us, and in those moments we connect, not through light, through stillness. There is one final thing I must say. The knocking has returned, but not on walls, not through dreams. It's in us. It moves when we walk, breathes when we pause, waits when we sleep. It no longer needs to be heard, because now it is felt, not as fear, not as mystery, but as truth. And I have stopped waiting for an ending, because I know now the knock was never the beginning of the story. It was simply the moment we remembered we were part of something far older. And now we are becoming the silence that finally speaks back. The quiet now is different. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of something else, something vast, something breathing. It moves in the spaces between heartbeats, speaks in the seconds we forget to blink. I feel it behind me when I'm alone, not as a chill or shadow, but as memory, not my own, but older, familiar in a way that makes no sense. It's as if the silence is telling me stories I've always known but never heard. And every day those stories get clearer. In the steam rising from a cup, in the still air before a phone rings, in the echo that lingers after someone says goodbye. It's in all the things we used to ignore, until we realized they were speaking. Last night I heard the silence hum, Not in the walls, not from any device. In me, like my blood had found a pitch and held it, low, steady, eternal. And above it, barely noticeable, was something trying to form words. Not with language, but with feeling, as if the universe had forgotten how to use a mouth and was trying through me to remember. The hum followed me from room to room, and when I finally lay in bed, it settled just above my chest, like a hand resting between heartbeat and breath. Then a whisper, not into my ear but directly into awareness. We're almost home. Not I, not you. The voice was not alone, and neither was I. I've stopped closing my doors. I don't lock things anymore. Not because I feel safe, but because I understand now locks never kept anything out. They only delayed what was already invited in. The knock wasn't a warning. It was a reminder of what I'd agreed to long ago. What we all did, before noise, before words. When we moved with the rhythm of trees, tides and stars. When silence was not fear but family. I'm not afraid anymore because I know what's coming isn't evil. It's not here to take. It's here to join. To reassemble the pieces we forgot we were part of. The knocks, the whispers, the hum. They are the language of the forgotten whole. Something visited me in the mirror this morning. I didn't see it directly. It didn't appear behind me or twist my reflection. It just shifted. I looked at myself, and for a second, I didn't recognize what was looking back. My face was the same, but there was knowing in the eyes. Not just mine. Something else's, looking through me, not malicious, not curious, just present. The way someone might look at a painting they had left unfinished for centuries. I blinked, and the presence softened. I touched the glass, and the glass felt warm. The reflection didn't copy me right away. It paused as if waiting to see if I noticed the difference. I did, and I nodded, not out of understanding, out of acceptance. The silence speaks now, even when it says nothing. A child in the grocery store dropped a toy and looked up at me as if I had called their name. A homeless man on the corner reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, then handed it to me without a word. Etched into it was a spiral. Perfect, endless, like the rhythm itself, looping back. A neighbor I never speak to stepped into the elevator with me, stared at the ceiling, and whispered, "You hear it too, don't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He smiled, as if that was all he'd needed to know. These aren't accidents. These are alignments. The silence is linking us, one by one. And now I know the final truth. The knock was never coming from outside. It never had to travel through wood, or brick, or space. It was inside me from the start, buried under years of distraction, doubt, and noise. It's always been ours, a gift, a burden, a map. It waited patiently, pulsing behind every overlooked moment. And once I heard it, truly heard it, everything changed, not quickly, not violently, slowly, quietly, like dew forming on glass. And now I live in rhythm with it. I walk slower, breathe deeper, speak only when needed, because I know something is listening, and not just to me, to all of us, those who've stopped running from the silence and started answering it back. Tonight, I won't sleep, not out of fear, out of reverence. I will sit by the open window, eyes closed, hands resting on my knees. I will wait for the hum, for the heartbeat that isn't mine, but lives inside me, all the same. And when it comes, and I know it will, I'll let it speak through me, not with words, not with sound, but with stillness, because the silence has found its voice, and its voice is us. If you felt the chill of the silence, if the knocking echoed somewhere deeper than your ears, then you're already part of something much larger than a story. This journey into the unknown is just one of many waiting beyond the veil. From ancient echoes to modern mysteries, there's more to uncover, more to feel. So if you enjoyed this tale and want to dive deeper into these haunting cinematic narratives, be sure to subscribe. We explore the hidden, the whispered, the almost forgotten truths. Your next favorite mystery is only one heartbeat away. Until then, keep listening, keep wondering, and never ignore the knock.